Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker, this time doing a tier list that completely excludes Warhammer from the equation. We're just going to be focusing on the quote-unquote historical Total War games and basing this on how good their battles are. There's going to be obviously various different criteria, and I'll get into that in a bit, but before we get into it, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Manscaped. So you guys know I've been with Manscaped for ages now. Love the product, love working with them. My Performance Package 4.0 has never let me down. But they've just brought out their new package, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. And that comes with assortment of upgraded goodies, including a nose hair trimmer, the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, some crop preserver, some crop soother, and some other assorted goodies inside the box. Manscaped is a product line that I can fully recommend because I use the product myself. I wouldn't advertise anything on this channel if I don't personally use it myself. So if you're interested at all in upping up your grooming game, then check out the link in the description and get yourself 20% off plus free international shipping. Big thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the tier list itself. So I think it's important to note that there are a few Total War games missing from this tier list, namely Shogun 1 and Medieval 1. The reason why I've omitted them from this tier list is simply because they're, in my opinion, quite outdated, and also I find it particularly hard to compare the Total War 1 engine battles with the Total War 2 and the Total War 3 engine. In my opinion, there are more differences between Medieval 1 and Rome Total War than between Rome Total War and Three Kingdoms. So I just don't feel comfortable putting them on a tier list here. I understand there'll be a few people wanting to hear my opinions on Medieval 1 and Shogun 1, but I personally feel like both of those games are completely outdated because Medieval 2 and Shogun 2 are basically just vastly superior to it, in my opinion. I just don't feel comfortable putting that on the tier list and basically bagging out these games, which are very good, they're just really old. And the other one that's not on here is Total War Pharaoh, and I think with Pharaoh, it's that I haven't played Total War Pharaoh. I don't own it. I don't want it. And I don't think it's fair to judge a game that I haven't played. The battles don't look good, but I don't think it's fair to put it on here if I haven't actually played it. And I think that many of you guys will understand that. I also think that most of you guys don't actually have any interest in Total War Pharaoh based on the player numbers anyway. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. Now, in terms of how we're going to judge these, there's lots of different criteria that we can use to judge the battles of any Total War game. I want to make some distinctions that we're going to be judging the campaign battles. This isn't based on multiplayer. So battle difficulty is going to come into a factor. Same thing with naval battles. Some of these games have naval battles, some of them don't. The ones that have naval battles, I will be judging those naval battles inclusive of their ranking. So some of these Total War games, there is a vast difference between normal difficulty and very hard. And in some of the games, the very hard battle difficulties makes the core way of how to play the game actually start to break down. Whereas some of them might have egregious cheats, but allow you to just use the game's core mechanics in order to overcome them, in which case I'll be a little bit more lenient in that regard. And there are some Total War games here which, on very hard battle difficulty, the cheats are not really that noticeable at all. And those really are the best Total War games in terms of the battles, in my opinion. But anyway, let's get into this. So I have made also a distinction here between Rome Total War and Rome Remastered, and we're going to be going in chronological order. So for Rome Total War, the original, this is a game that I hold very dear to my heart, and it's important to note that this is a battle tier list, not an overall rating of the game tier list, so just keep that in mind. I think that the battles in Rome Total War for 2023 are B tier. The reason for this is that I think there's some really good things with the battles. I think they've got a really robust morale system. The units feel good to use on the field, but sieges, the pathfinding is just not acceptable for 2023. It's by far the biggest thing that stops me from playing Rome Total War in 2023 is the difficulty in using my units during sieges. It's so difficult to just get them to walk forward along a street without them constantly twirling around and exposing their flanks. So pathfinding is a big problem for me. Now, Rome Total War has egregious cheats when it comes to very hard battle difficulty. So to put things in perspective, in the early stages of your campaign, your unit of Hastati will probably lose to a unit of peasants in a straight-up fight. but the game has a robust morale system that allows you to overcome those odds using tactics. And I think that's really important. And the whole point of Total War games is not to win via just bringing the strongest army, but to win by outmaneuvering the enemy. And so the highest ratings will go for Total War games that encourage that kind of gameplay, and the lowest ratings will go for those that discourage tactics and encourage spamming just strong units. I think that that's really boring ways to play Total War games. Of course, that's my personal opinion. If you disagree with that, you're more than welcome to disagree. Leave a comment and explain why that you disagree. Totally fine with that. Just be civil about it. No need for name calling. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on Rome Total War. I love Rome Total War. Holds a place in my heart. It's the Total War game that put Total War on the map, in my opinion. But I think in 2023, the battles just aren't quite as good as some of these other ones here. The pathfinding specifically is really letting it down. And at least on very hard battle difficulty, like I said, even though the AI cheats to an egregious amount, you really do have the tools that you need to overcome it, even if you're outpowered by the enemy, by just utilizing the core mechanics of, killing the enemy general, charging and into the rear of the enemy units, outmaneuvering them, that kind of stuff. Holding the high ground makes a big difference. Terrain awareness, all this stuff feels really good in Rome Total War. Then we've got Medieval 2. So Medieval 2 takes everything good about Rome Total War and continues its legacy. So it goes straight into S tier here, because even though this game here is nearly 20 years old, I feel like it still holds up in 2023. Now, the things that are maybe letting it down a little bit, and every single Total War game has elements that let it down. There is no Total War game that's perfect, none of them. But the things that are letting Medieval 2 down is obviously just sort of outdated camera controls. The units can be a little bit unresponsive, or to some extent very unresponsive. I oftentimes find that the weight of a unit, dictates how responsive it is. Like light cavalry, for example, will move fairly quickly after you give it an order, whereas heavy cavalry will feel kind of sluggish. Charges feel super impactful in Medieval 2, which it should, and basically the battles kind of play out exactly as they should for a medieval time period. And you're encouraged to utilize the game's core mechanics to play the game by utilizing superior terrain, by utilizing killing the enemy general, causing a mass rout, rather than just bringing the strongest units. Like spamming dismounted feudal knights is not the way to go in Medieval 2 Total War. Instead, having a combination of light cavalry, heavy cavalry, spears, all of this kind of stuff is heavily rewarded. In terms of the battle difficulties with Medieval 2, I cannot tell the difference between normal battle difficulty and very hard. I know that the AI does cheat, but it's to such a minor degree that honestly, even a new player probably wouldn't be able to really tell that big of a difference on the highest difficulty. Now, that does leave Medieval 2 to have battles that can sometimes feel quite easy, but what they do feel is fun. It doesn't feel like it's unfair and unfair engagements. Like if you've got units if you're having like an infantry brawl, your units don't just get instantly slaughtered by inferior units. It doesn't feel really bad in that regard. Obviously, units of similar types, let's just say you got 2 units of spearmen fighting each other, the AI will probably win, but they're not going to win by a ridiculous degree. They'll win by a small degree. So the cheats are there, but just really sort of minor. So Medieval 2, I think, does the battles really well. Then we've got Empire Total War. This is the first Total War game that introduces naval battles, which will count towards its rating, as I mentioned before. So Empire Total War, I'm going to put this under C tier. I am not a fan of Empire Total War's battles. Now, I got to make a lot of distinctions with this one because there's lots of elements to it. I actually really like the naval battles in Empire Total War, but I don't find that they are the majority of the battles that I am forced to play in Empire Total War. Although if I had to choose, I would just play naval battles in Empire Total War because they feel really good. The way that the cannons hit into the broadsides and causes visible damage, the way that you can destroy specific parts of the ship, the way that you can destroy cannons or the crew of the ship, the way that you can board, all of this stuff feels really good in Empire Total War. It's definitely the best part of the game. But the land battles are so bad in Empire Total War. The AI is atrocious, the pathfinding is atrocious, the maps, the tiny little obstructions all over the place, whereas if one of your unit isn't correctly positioned, the whole unit just doesn't function. All of these things are a massive problem, requiring huge amounts of micromanage, basically, just to make sure that all of your units are in the right position. And then you've got the battle difficulty. Now, I don't really have that much of a problem with the AI cheating, but if you cheat to such an extent that the core way that which the game is supposed to be played starts to break down and not function, then that's a big problem. And Empire Total War suffers from that problem. On normal battle difficulty, the battles play out just fine. But on very hard battle difficulty, basically, the way that these battles are obviously supposed to be played out is that your guns are supposed to shoot at their guns, and it's all really just about positioning. If you've got a better position than theirs, then you should overcome the odds. But in very hard battle difficulty, you might have a superior position with line infantry going up against militia, and your units will lose because of the egregious way that the AI cheats. Because they get massive bonuses to their accuracy, so they're going to kill your units faster than your units can kill them, even though you might have the high ground position, forcing you to basically not play that way, forcing you to focus on killing the enemy general, which is not really how battles were fought in this time period, and focus on utilizing the bad AI against itself, charging at them while they're completely blobbed up, which they will do repeatedly. And by doing morale, like charging into them into melee, because they don't get that many melee cheats compared to their missile cheats. Basically trying to overcome the cheats by not playing the game as it was intended. So that works heavily against it there, which makes the battles, in my opinion, really not fun. Because if you're focusing on basically using Medieval 2 tactics in Empire Total War, the game, it does not hold up well in terms of using those tactics whatsoever. The cannons feel pretty good, unlimited ammunition on cannons, but they do shoot pretty slowly and very inaccurately. But there are a few cheats in regard to that can feel a bit frustrating with the AI. So, for example, if your infantrymen are standing in front of your cannons and you shoot, well, you're probably going to kill some of your own men. But if the AI does it, they get a free pass on it because the AI is so bad that rather than trying to fix the AI, they just gave the AI a free pass on basically friendly firing their own units, which they'll do repeatedly. They will constantly put their units in front of their own cannons and shoot them, and the units will fall down. They'll just get back up, whereas yours won't. So a lot of cheats there with the AI that I just feel like it's to overcome the stupidity and just the lack of polish on this game. So I'm really going to put it at C tier here. I know a lot of people really love Empire Total War, but I think this is the most unpolished turd of a Total War game ever made. Now, I would really love for them to make another Empire Total War and have the gun systems works as well as Fall of the Samurai. Which, another note of that, which I'll get to soon, I don't have Fall of the Samurai separate to Shogun 2 because it's going to get the same rank. Okay, so then we've got Napoleon Total War. Now, for the most part, Napoleon plays exactly the same as Empire Total War. The naval battles, the level of cheats, the field battles. But it does have a quite a significant amount more polish, and it feels a lot more better. It feels a lot better to play Napoleon Total War than it does Empire Total War. So I'm going to put it at B tier there, but it does suffer from a lot of the same problems, especially when it comes to like the battle difficulty cheats, where your guns feel frustrating against the enemy guns, and the AI still making some pretty stupid mistakes. Doesn't really feel that satisfying on the higher battle difficulty. On normal difficulty, it's fine, but I definitely don't think it deserves A or S tier. It's just a better version of Empire Total War, in my opinion. Okay, then we've got Total War Shogun 2, which definitely is going into S tier. Now, I'm also including Fall of the Samurai in this. I know the Fall of the Samurai is a saga game now, but it wasn't really when it first came out. It was a standalone expansion to Shogun 2, and it's just as polished as the original, so I'm just going to lump it all in together. So the battles in Shogun 2 can be separated into land battles and naval battles. Now, the naval battles I'm going to talk about first. In the original campaign, I don't think the naval battles are great. Whereas in Fall of the Samurai, I think the naval battles feel really good. So that's a bit of a distinction there. But the thing is with Shogun 2, you don't fight that many naval battles, so I don't think I should weigh it that highly. At least me personally, I just don't find that I focus on building fleets. I focus more on the land battle side of things. Whereas Empire Total War, you're going to have a bigger ratio of naval battles to land battles due to how much navies you're going to send out there. If you want to actually do that, you could of course not recruit any fleets. That's entirely up to you. But in Shogun 2, you definitely can get away with basically never recruiting a single fleet. Now, in terms of the land battles, this is really an epitome of what the Warscape engine can achieve. It's very simplistic. It doesn't use a whole lot of unit variance, but what it does is it gets the basics right. The melee infantry feel good, the archers feel good. The AI does cheat a little bit in terms of the very high battle difficulty when it comes to archers, but you can definitely overcome it if you know what you're doing. By utilizing terrain, firing from the forest or from a high ground makes a big difference. Using loose formation, using fire arrows, flanking enemy units, killing the enemy general, causing a mass rout, holding up into your castle, all of these things make a big difference. Tactics really matters in Total War Shogun 2, but you can definitely find yourself in situations where you can be so outpowered that there is nothing you can do to overcome those odds, but that is largely due to how much the AI actually cheats on the campaign map, so I'm not really going to judge it too much in that regard there. In terms of evenly field battles, it feels really satisfying to play Shogun 2, both the attack and the defense, by utilizing just the natural abilities that your units have. A lot of them have, even the lower tier units, a special ability that gives them an edge if you use it correctly. Like, for example, Yari Wall for the Yari Ashigaru, you got the fast movement for the samurai, you got the cause fear for the monks, and that's a way of making this essentially the same unit have a distinct function aside from just having better stats, which I think is a good way of doing it. You are not required to recruit just the highest tier army and just roll over the enemy. Instead, you have to think about each unit's strengths and weaknesses, and that's what Total War does best. And then it brings me to Rome 2 Total War, a game that forgot all of that, okay? I'm going to put Rome 2's battles under C tier, okay? Rome 2 is still a pretty damn popular Total War game, but I have got some massive problems with how this game works on the battlefield, because like I said before, in my opinion, battles should be decided based on the tactics, not the strength of the enemy army. And in Rome 2 Total War, the strength of your army is the deciding factor in most of the cases. Now, you can definitely overcome the odds to some degree if you have specialist units. Now, specialist units I would classify as elephants, pikemen, and scythe chariots. These are units that are able to inflict massive numbers of casualties in the right situation. But since the vast majority of armies will be basically hoplites, heavy infantry, javelin men, archers, just those kind of units, and light and heavy cavalry, these are units that have a difficult time overcoming odds if they're an inferior unit. And when it comes to Rome 2, the battle difficulty is extremely egregious on very high battle difficulty. So your equally tiered units will not stand a chance against the AI. And since tactics don't really have that much of an impact in Rome 2, it can be very frustrating in many experiences where you've got an equal strength army to the enemy, and even though you're trying to pull off maneuvers like flanking them and killing the enemy general, the game just goes, "No, this army's stronger than yours, you lose." And that can be very frustrating, requiring, if you do want to win those situations, essentially a lot of cheesing, a lot of running around and skirmishing, again, not playing the way that the game was necessarily intended to be played. So with Rome 2, killing the enemy general has probably the least amount of impact as to any other Total War game. Most of your units, unless you have just super low tier units, most of them won't even go from being confident to shaken by the death of the general. The generals in Rome 2 just feel like dead weight. What are they even there for? You have to have one, but they've got a couple of special abilities, but they don't really have any significant impact on the army in terms of keeping it all together in Rome 2. Which is I think that's a big problem. Every single other Total War game here, killing the enemy general can sometimes turn the tide against an unwinnable battle, but in Rome 2 it just doesn't really matter whatsoever. So overcoming the odds in Rome 2 is really just about having better units than the AI. You're rushing your Praetorian Guard, essentially. If you've got an army of Praetorian Guard playing as Rome, you can go up against 4 full stacks, no problem, because they just can't overcome your odds, and you can just laugh as they try to do tactics, and they'll just get slaughtered at your feet, even if you're playing on very hard battle difficulty. And I just don't think that stats should win battles. I think that tactics should win battles, and Rome 2 doesn't reward tactics very well, in my opinion, with the exception of those specialist units, which are not readily available to all factions at all times. So I'm not super fond of the Rome 2 field battles, and also the naval battles are terrible in Rome 2. I usually just try to auto-resolve them because they just don't feel good. The maps are incredibly small, super boring battles. I just do not like the naval battles. I do like the idea of having combined naval and field battles, so that's a great idea. I just think it's really poorly implemented. So yeah, not fond of Rome 2's battles at all. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but like I said, not fun. The thing is, if you're playing Rome 2 on normal battle difficulty, you're probably not really encountering these issues that I'm encountering, because it is really quite significantly amplified on those higher battle difficulties. Now, You could also argue, we'll just play it on normal battle difficulty. Well, the thing is, it's still there. It's just less egregious. Unfortunately, tactics, even on normal battle difficulty, don't really feel very satisfying. Like killing the enemy general and charging into the rear of an enemy unit. Like, I've had situations where I've encircled an enemy general with inferior units, because that's all I had available, like because they're attacking a garrison, right? Completely surrounded his army, but he's a unit of Oathsworn, and all I've got are bloody Roarii, and I'm cycle charging constantly trying to break this guy, and nothing works. In fact, nothing is even doing any damage to the guy whatsoever, and that can just feel really frustrating. Whereas in other Total War games, you can definitely do that. Even like Medieval 2, if you surround a general's unit with low-tier peasants, not peasants, maybe low-tier spear units, you can kill that guy actually very cost-effectively. Same thing with all of these Total War games, but Rome 2 just doesn't really allow you to do that very much. So that's why I'm putting it so low there. Now, Total War Attila, on the other hand, actually learnt from a lot of Rome 2's mistakes and actually gets the S tier. So this is probably going to be a bit weird for some people, because I've said a lot of negative things about Total War Attila, but everything negative about Total War Attila is usually about the campaign. I really hate the campaign of Total War Attila, but I've actually been playing a little bit of the battles. I've been playing another campaign of Total War Attila in my own time recently. The battles are great in Total War Attila, even on very hard battle difficulty. You can overcome the odds with tactics, because they've basically done what they did at Shogun 2. They've given a lot of units a tool to overcome a difficult situation, especially for the Western Romans. Like, a lot of your basic infantry have some kind of testudo, allowing you to basically nullify enemy missiles and to hold your positions as long as possible, giving you time to have your very few cavalry to come in and flank. Killing the enemy general is incredibly satisfying in Total War Attila, because a unit that has routed after the enemy general has died cannot rally. They always shatter, and it has a permanent morale penalty, which you can go into its into the unit card and have a look to see what its negatives are. And you've got archer units that have access to different types of missiles. One specifically, Whistle Shot, allows you to overcome the odds by breaking the enemy unit. So if you're going up against an army that is vastly larger than you, and you kill the enemy general, you've got one archer and you use Whistle Shot, and it causes a mass rout, that feels really satisfying in Total War Attila. Oftentimes, there will be battles where you are outnumbered 2-1, 5-1, 10-1, and you'll be able to overcome those odds because the game doesn't entirely rely on stats. Now, in terms of the battle difficulties, very hard battle difficulty will see the AI get egregious melee cheats. They will rip through your forces fairly quickly. But again, because the game has a robust system allowing you to overcome those odds by breaking the enemies, because no amount of melee attack and melee defense and weapon strength means anything once a unit has shattered. And because cavalry feel really satisfying in Total War Attila, you can overcome those odds in most situations. Obviously, if you've got 2 units of melee infantry with no archers and no real ability to kill the enemy general, you're probably going to lose. But if you've even just got a handful of units that have, and most of your garrisons will have this, a couple of units of infantry, an archer unit, and a unit of cavalry, you can take on a full stack in Total War Attila, even on very hard battle difficulty. So I quite like the battles in Attila. And you've got different factions with different playstyles. Like, you've got the Eastern factions that don't rely quite so heavily on their formations, and instead you've got access to units like elephants. So different playstyles throughout the different campaigns that you can play. Then we've got Thrones of Britannia over here. I think Thrones of Britannia is pretty damn similar to Total War Attila, but due to its smaller scope, I'm going to give it an A tier. I suppose I didn't really talk that much about Total War Attila's naval battles, and that's largely because I just don't fight them in Total War Attila. I don't recruit navies in Attila, really. And if I do recruit a navy, I usually just auto-resolve it. I don't think the naval battles are particularly good in Attila, but they're definitely better than they were in Rome 2. I just want to make that quick distinction because I think I forgot about it. Now, with Thrones of Britannia, this is kind of where they did away with navies. You can still fight battles out at sea, but there's no navies. It's that your army can encounter another army, and then their ships can fight each other, and just they go into melee. I don't think that is a point for Thrones of Britannia whatsoever. But I think what shines in Thrones of Britannia is really the size of the sieges, which, by the way, Total War Attila has got amazing sieges as well. The fact that you can basically burn down the city to cause the morale problems onto the AI or onto you, I suppose, can be quite devastating one way or another. So going up against a marauder army that's going to burn down your city, you would try to prevent that from happening. Same sort of thing with Thrones of Britannia. The sieges are really good, but just lack of unit variety and just lack of scope of the game, I think, really lets it down. I always really enjoyed the battles in Thrones of Britannia. The problem is the campaign, because I've also spoken quite badly about Thrones of Britannia. But I just don't think that the battles in Thrones of Britannia offer anything really distinct difference from Total War Attila, which is why I just don't really favor it over Total War. Like, if I'm going to play either one of these two, I'm definitely going to prefer Attila. Okay, Total War Three Kingdoms. I think this one here belongs in A tier, personally. So they tried to recapture the same feeling with Shogun 2, but I think the area which they failed was the single entities. Obviously, you can bypass that by playing on Records mode, but since Romance mode is kind of the preferred way to play, Records mode is kind of a watered-down version of it. We do need to take that into consideration. There are no naval battles in Total War Three Kingdoms. If your army encounters another army out at sea, you have to auto-resolve it. You don't even get to fight a battle out at sea or a land battle. So that's a big mark against it, probably stopping it from getting from A tier. But in terms of how the units function, every unit's quite responsive. The pathfinding's pretty good, for a Total War game, obviously. The cheats are definitely there, for sure. But I think they're something a bit of they're medium cheats. Like, high cheats, high cheats, high cheats, high cheats, high cheats, low cheats, low cheats, medium cheats. Just to put things in perspective. They get some, against an equal unit. So your, purple infantry going up against the purple infantry, you'll probably lose. But that's not really the purpose of your infantry, is to hold the line, because these battles are oftentimes decided by your missile units and your cavalry. Cavalry are hugely devastating in Total War Three Kingdoms, and the tools that you have at your disposal for using cavalry and missile units, it's all there. So even though on very hard battle difficulty, there is cheats there, the way that the game is supposed to be played allows you to overcome those odds for a competent player. So Total War Three Kingdoms feels really good in that regard. The only problem is that in Total War Three Kingdoms, stopping it from getting S tier, is that a lot of the battles do feel very samey. Obviously, they've added some more distinct factions later down the track, but a lot of the time you'll just be fighting very similar armies, which again is kind of the same problem that Shogun 2 has, but I just think there's less polish in Three Kingdoms than Shogun 2, personally. Obviously, I do think the battles are quite good in Three Kingdoms. I just don't think it's worthy of S tier, because there are quite a few issues here and there. It's not as polished. That being said, Medieval 2 is not polished, but I think the overall feel of Medieval 2 is superior to pretty much all of these. Anyway, moving on to Troy. So, Troy. I don't think I'm going to have much pushback on this. Troy's battles are garbage. Absolute garbage. Doesn't matter what battle mode you're playing on. This game sucks in terms of its battles. When I played Total War Troy, the very small amount of time that I did play it, was like 20, 30 hours, I wanted to skip every single battle that I fought, because on very hard battle difficulty, the AI cheats like crazy, and you can definitely overcome it by the same problem that Rome 2 has, basically, where it doesn't matter about tactics, it matters about the units that you bring to the battlefield. Basically, spamming chariots guarantees you're always going to win, and spamming the best units you possibly can guarantees you're going to win. Having Achilles basically guarantees that you're going to win, sort of thing. You can definitely overcome odds in it if you've got the right unit types, but if you've got the wrong unit types, well, then there's not much you can do. The collision in this game is absolutely atrocious, where you can just pull a unit through another unit for the most part and take next to no damage. The battles in Troy just absolutely suck, from mythos to historical mode and to truth behind the myth. I absolutely despised every element of the battles in Total War Troy, and since they pretty much imported that straight into Pharaoh, that's the primary reason why I wasn't interested in Pharaoh. I despise the battles in Troy. So it doesn't have naval battles, but it does have armies that can engage at sea and then fight a land battle. I would have played a lot more Total War Troy if I could have just auto-resolved more battles. So I really In my personal opinion, the Troy battles are the worst element of it, and the campaign was actually quite nice, but the battles I just couldn't stand playing. Them. It was so boring. From siege battles to the minor settlement battles to the field battles, I didn't enjoy a single battle that I fought, regardless of whether I won or lost. Most of the time I won. It just wasn't really that interesting. I just think for a game that came out in 2020, it really didn't further the game franchise at all. So D tier games battles for that one. Then we've got Rome Remastered. So Rome Remastered is very similar to Rome Total War, but it does make a few improvements. So I'm going to actually put it under A tier because the camera controls have been massively improved upon. The pathfinding hasn't been improved upon. It has introduced a larger unit scale, which of course you don't have to use. But another thing is that the AI cheats a bit more than it did in Rome Total War based on the highest battle difficulty, allowing you, a situation which we saw in the live stream fairly recently that can lead to a very challenging campaign because sometimes your units can just feel really impotent and you do require a bit more effort in order to win. Whereas Rome Total War, I was able to overcome the odds quite easily. So on very high battle difficulty, it does cheat more than regular Rome, which is a bit of a culture shock. But the main benefit here is better camera controls. It would have entered S tier if it could have fixed up that pathfinding issues, but they haven't done that. And I don't think they're going to. I think that this game has stopped being updated. So there we go. There is the battle tier list there. Overall, you can see that there are more games under S and A tier than B, C, and D tier. Any Total War game has some people's favorite. It's some people's favorite Total War game and some people's least favorite. From Empire Total War to Rome 2, Shogun 2, Medieval 2. There's some people out there that absolutely hate Shogun 2, that absolutely hate Medieval 2, and just love Rome 2. And I think that having subjective opinions on all this stuff is totally fine. If you're one of the people that totally disagree, I'm sure there's going to be someone, lots of people actually, that disagree with one of these choices here. Post a comment in the comments. And let me know why you think I'm wrong about any of this. As civilly as possible. Obviously, no reason to be like, "Oh, you dumb fuck, you just wrong. Rome 2 best." That doesn't really. It's not going to do anything. Give a well-reasoned argument as to why the battles in Rome 2 are better than C tier, and I'll go in and have a look, and maybe one day we'll update this tier list. But anyway, I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to check out Manscaped. Link in the description. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.